Hello everybody and welcome to Guild Wars 2 Daily for today. I literally have no idea what I'm going to do for the footage in the background today. We are meant to be doing events for today, but I also, since Halloween has now started in Guild Wars 1, really want to go in there and show some stuff off. My first idea was to show you Guild Wars 1 costume brawl. I mean, that would be awesome, right? But apparently that's down at the moment, which is very, very odd. Like, things never went down for Guild Wars 1 in the old days, but now stuff is going down quite often, so I don't know what's going on there. It's not actually available, so we might be doing an event. In any case, I'm sure you'll see what we're doing because it's right there on the screen at the moment. But yeah, today I wanted to do a lore spotlight, as ever, as we do on Fridays, and in particular one on Mad King Thorn. I've been holding off on various bits of information about this guy and about Halloween as the week's gone on because I kind of wanted to leave a fair bit of it for today. Luckily for me, there is a lot of information about Mad King Thorn. It's really weird information though, and it's kind of spread out all over the place, and it's just lots of very odd facts that I guess ArenaNet wrote in to be funny a lot of the times, and it was funny, but now we have this really weird kind of biography or understanding of this character with these weird oddities and strange facts that honestly no other character can compare to in the Guild Wars universe. But before we do that, I'll give you guys the little bit of official news. It's Friday once again, so there's been another concept art spotlight on guildwars2.com. That's with Taylor Krabenbull. I'm probably saying that name wrong, and for that I deeply apologise. But yeah, it's another one of those. I haven't really been reading these, I've got to be honest. I've not been reading them. I do skim them and look at the images at the very least, but not reading them that much. This guy's stuff looks okay. But yeah, there is that. You can find a link in the description down below to it if you wish. Once again, Pink Day is tomorrow. I think I said it was tomorrow in yesterday's episode. I was actually wrong. It's tomorrow. So it's on the 20th. Today it's the 19th, or very almost the 20th because I've left it quite late to film. But Pink Day will be happening on the 20th, which is a Saturday, the 20th of October. So there's that. Aside from that, no other official news. We'll talk about patches and stuff come Monday. So yeah, with the lore spotlight, I'll try and start at the beginning, but we should probably just sum up the general story of Mad King Thorn first. Tyria has something called Mad King's Day. Now, for the past 250 years, it seems this hasn't actually been happening. In the update, the new information we got about Halloween yesterday, ArenaNet revealed that there hasn't been an appearance of Mad King Thorn, this character, for 250 years, but he's scheduled to come back next week, so he will finally come back and break the silence. But the idea here is that in Tyria, there's this mad spirit lord from the underworld, one of the realms that people go to when they die, that comes back one day a year, and that was happening frequently 250 years ago. Back when we were playing Guild Wars 1, he was popping up all over the place, but for Guild Wars 2's sake, he hasn't been there for a long time. Everyone's kind of begun to think of him as something of a fairy tale and not really believing in his existence, but once again he's coming back to terrorize people. Why he hasn't been here for the past 250 years, I guess that's something we'll find out next week. But this guy does have a pretty rich and storied life, and in fact that article that ArenaNet did put out yesterday gives us some more information about the man. In particular, it gives us a time frame from when he died, and they say it was 500 years before Guild Wars 2. So that's 250 years before Guild Wars 1. Honestly, I thought he was older than that. It may be the way that they've written in a lot of the quests in the first game, but I thought he was this ancient guy. But it's only 250 years before the first game, but I suppose that is a pretty long passage of time. So this was a king of Kryta, someone that actually sat on the throne of presumably royal blood, descended from the great kings of past like King Doric, who brought peace to the land, but had himself gone a bit insane and become quite tyrannical. So 250 years before Guild Wars 1, he was the king, and he was a terrible king, a very, very bad king. What I quite like about this 250, now that we have a specific date though, 250 years before the first game, you can actually go to the timeline, a proper good in-depth timeline for Guild Wars 2, and actually look at stuff that was happening in Tyria around that same time, and I'm really happy to see that it lines up with other things ArenaNet had already established about this character. So I love that they've actually finally given us this lore, and even if they have just invented it for themselves, they have at least gone back and everything fits really well. So about 250 years before the events of Guild Wars 1, first of all, this was around the same time that a man named Lord Odrin, a human, was first learning how to create portals to the mists. So the place that Mad King Thorn currently exists, the underworld, the afterlife, back during his life there was a powerful human mage that was actually learning how to traverse those planes for himself. So while he was alive, so was this other great mysterious character, this guy called Lord Odrin, who was creating all these portals around Tyria's world to traverse through the mists and go to other real physical worlds as well. And it's likely that's a coincidence, but we do have Mad King Thorn, who's this interesting character that for some reason, unlike all other people, all other tyrannical kings and so forth throughout Tyria's history, they all just die in and that's the end of it. But Mad King Thorn, for some reason, has had this ability, this blessing to come back one day a year, and he's even been treated quite well in death. He's got his own realm within the underworld known as the Mad Realm, which he rules over as Spirit Lord. That doesn't happen to anyone else, but it has happened to him. And maybe, now that we know he was alive around the same time as this Lord Oddrun guy was alive, you could perhaps say, and that's just 100% speculation, but you could say that maybe they somehow knew each other or they're taking advantage of one another. But Lord Oddrun himself is quite a tragic tale. He was trespassing in the land of the dead, essentially, through the mists, and he was going through all these afterlives, and eventually the spirits that resided within those realms found out how to attack Lord Oddrun while he was there, and he was slain and just brutally murdered while he was travelling when he shouldn't have really been doing so. So yeah, he had quite a tragic end, and I guess in the same way, King Thorn, as they would have known him while he was alive, also had a reasonably tragic end. So maybe they were in cahoots. That's just my own speculation. I just like that you can clearly see that these two characters were alive around the same time, and it could offer some answers if you're willing to believe that. Also, that what's happening in the world as well, this is what I really like that I give props to ArenaNet's lore guys for, is at the time of Mad King Thorn being alive, about 30 years after he died or so, Palawa Joko, a lich, invaded Elona, one of the other continents, the continent to the south, and conquered Vabi, earning himself the title of the Scourge of Vabi. And he then proceeded to try and destroy and take over all of Elona. This was this massive event in Elonan history, and finally Palawa Joko, although he couldn't be killed, this lich couldn't be killed, he was defeated at the hands of a man named Chirai Ossa. This was all about 30 years after Mad King Thorn died. And that ties in really well because in Guild Wars 1, we never knew the specific time that Mad King Thorn was alive, but we did know that he knew Palawa Joko, and King Thorn himself visited Elona from time to time, even had a wife in Elona for a while, and during those visits, he got into many scuffles and little disagreements with Palawa Joko. So we knew that there was a history between these two characters, and now that we have a specific date for when Mad King Thorn was alive, or just King Thorn at the time, we can actually see that it does all add up. King Thorn described Palawa Joko while he was alive as an up-and-coming, soon-to-be king of Elona, and what do you know, 30 years after he died, Palawa Joko actually did rise to try and conquer all of Elona, and was almost very successful in that. So it all ties up, it all goes really well. Just to complete the picture as well, the third continent interior, a place called Cantha, doesn't actually celebrate or recognise Mad King Day, and I think that's because King Thorn, we have no records of him ever really interacting with Canthans or ever going that far south. However, in Cantha at the same time, just in case you guys were wondering, this was about the same time as the Canthans commissioned the Zaishan to the Battle Isles, which is also really cool because you hear that the Zaishan went to the Battle Isles around the same time that Lord Oddrun created a portal to the mists at the Battle Isles, which the Zaishan then later took advantage of to host tournaments to try and rule in the Hall of the Heroes. So it all just ties up so nicely, it all works so together. Another minor thing that's reasonably interesting, the only other fact we have about that time in Cantha was that the then Emperor, who was like the 24th Emperor or something, this guy called Emperor Senvo, started rebuilding the Great Palace there, a place called Raisu Palace, which had just been burnt down by an angry mob, which also kind of ties into something that will happen to Mad King Thorn in a little while too. So that's the state of Tyria at the time of this guy being alive, about 250 years before Guild Wars 1 even began, 500 years before Guild Wars 2, and about 200 years also after Kryta had become recognised as an independent state. If you don't know, Kryta, the nation that you can go to in Guild Wars 2 and have a walk around that very specific place, used to be, and it was founded by the Elonans, the guys far to the south. It started off as a colony of Elona, but eventually, about 200 years, as I say, before Mad King Thorn came into be, so this is 450 years before Guild Wars 1, around then, a very long time ago, it became an independent colony, and 200 years after that, King Thorn came to rule over it, and he was a terrible king. In particular, during his reign, there was this terrible, terrible famine that we hear about, and during the famine, instead of doing things to help the populace and get people through this terrible time, he just hosted, like, very blatantly hosted, very kind of public banquets for all of his courtiers, and obviously didn't give any of this wonderful food to anyone else around Kryta, so everyone could just watch on and starve while he was having this horrible, decadent, exquisite lifestyle, which people started to hate him for. And it got a little bit worse than that, because then he started flaying people. He started skinning them alive for questioning him. So he wasn't the most popular of kings. He seemed to have done many terrible things during his reign that made nobody really like him, and this resulted in a very large, angry mob storming his palace somewhere in Kryta. We don't actually know where this palace was, because they stormed it. Everyone that was all of Mad King Thorn's staff also presumably hated him, so as soon as the Mangry mob got there, they all ran away, abandoned him, and he was killed by someone with a carving knife in his own palace. And it's quite a gruesome image, actually, that ArenaNet have painted here, which goes hand in hand with this whole Halloween theme. Don't forget that this is all information we've got around the Halloween events from Guild Wars 1's festivals. There's quite a lot of depth that go into these things, so if you're liking the amount of information here, then I'm expecting or hoping for about the same amount going into Guild Wars 2. So they all stormed this palace, very dark, they all hated him, everybody abandoned him, and then he was just killed with a carving knife. Now we get in this article as well that we hadn't really heard before. We get in this article from yesterday that then they chopped his body into pieces and spread them all around the land. I think that might have something to do with the seals, which I'll talk about later. So the guy died, and after he was died, everything was burned. His palace was burned to the ground, and so now we don't really know where he was while he was ruling. Whether Lion's Arch was the capital back then, I think maybe we could find out. Hold on, let me have a look at the timeline. Well, the lore does say that Lion's Arch always housed the royal palace, even after King Doric, so I guess it's safe to assume that Mad King Thorn lived in Lion's Arch too, which may be why he's coming back there in Guild Wars 2. It's just that his specific palace was burned down there, and a new one was erected later for the next king that came along. So presumably, by the way, this does mean that the royal line was never broken in Kryta, so this does mean that King Thorn had a son at some point. Presumably, he had a son who then continued on the royal line. The only other explanation might be that King Thorn came to power in Kryta, but he wasn't actually of royal blood, like he was a different king that came forward, but we've never heard any real examples of that, and we do have a lot of lore that says that the blood from King Doric has come specifically down through the ages, so I'm going to assume that King Thorn did have a son at some point, only his son wasn't a tyrannical bastard, and after his father died, they actually kind of crowned him, and everything continued on as normal, so that's an interesting thing to think of too. But in any case, they burned his palace down, the original palace down, and spread the parts of his body. So now for any normal person, you would just die. You would go to the afterlife, you would go to the mists, and at first you would be judged by the god of death, Grenth, and he would say, right, okay, what have you done in life? Where do you deserve to go in the afterlife? Because there are many different realms of afterlives to go to. Now for some reason that we don't know, and I don't know whether they'll ever explain to us, Grenth decided that Mad King Thorn should stay in the underworld, so that is a possibility. Everyone goes to the underworld first to be judged, but then sometimes they'll get ferried off to other areas, but you can stay in the underworld if that's the kind of life you've lived. And not only would he stay in the underworld, but he'd also go to this specific place called the Mad Realm, which could have even been created for Mad King Thorn, or he could have created it for himself, and from within that Mad Realm, this guy, this spirit, could now become like the lord over. And even beyond that, Grenth also granted this guy permission to once a year, one day out of every year, be able to return to Tyria to mess with mortals and use all this kind of crazy spirit lord magic. Now, whether Grenth specifically said, yes, you may do this, or whether Mad King Thorn, after he'd gone to the underworld, kind of worked his way up and was a bit sly and figured out how to do it on his own, we don't know. We don't know the circumstances of why he's in this position now, but he is. And as a result, once a year, for a very long time, for many years in a row, as far as we can see, he would come back to Kryta, and also he would go to an area of Alona, where he once married this woman, and terrorize the people there, presumably because he'd been stormed and killed by them many years ago, and he would terrorize people once a year from then on. Now, despite the fact he can only come back for 1 year, it does seem it's possible for him to come back all year, potentially. There's a group of people called the Lunatic Court who are trying to make that happen, and they say that there is a series of seals stopping Mad King Thorn from coming back all year, and they're trying to break those seals. Now, one of those seals was broken when royal blood was returned to the Krytan throne, so as soon as there wasn't royal blood on the throne during the events of Guild Wars 1, a seal was somehow created, but by returning royal blood, it was broken. We don't know how many seals there are there, but going back to this idea that he's been cut up and chopped into many different pieces, it's my guess that they're going to try and like bring the pieces of his body back together, and that will break all of the seals, and that might be some part of the ritual to free Mad King Thorn. In a bizarre twist, because this is all kind of done through Halloween updates, it's this kind of horrifying, terrible character, but he's kind of a bit of an anti-hero. Like, people actually quite like this guy, and during the events in Guild Wars 1, although he was terrible and he was transforming men into beasts and terrorizing pleasing everyone. He was also very high-spirited about it. He was always laughing and joking, and one of the main things he did was tell you, the players, lots of terrible jokes that you were kind of forced to agree with and laugh at, and he'd reward you, otherwise he'd slay you on the spot if you didn't. So there was always this kind of happy atmosphere about him, and people really like this character, even though he's this tyrant and this terrible guy. So it's curious what they'll do in Guild Wars 2, whether we'll be allied with him in helping him come back all year, or whether we won't, or whether that will even take a role in Guild Wars 2's Halloween. We do have this long period of time where, for some reason, he wasn't allowed back into Kryta once a year for a really long time. Was that Grenth stepping up and saying, well, what are you doing? No, I'm not allowing this anymore, and now he's broken free again? Or what? I guess we'll find out going forward. But yeah, he's this fascinating guy. He's got loads of history. There were tons of quests to do with him. As I say, he had this wife in Alona. He actually had like 8 wives, and one of them was burned alive. The one he got in Alona, he only convinced to become his wife because he was holding her father as hostage, and just all this terrible, crazy stuff that really fleshes this guy's character out. And as I say, he really didn't like Palawa Joko, who is also a character that's still around and quite important to do with Alona at the moment. So maybe we'll see something happen there too. That's about it for Mad King Thorn. He is really the centre of Mad King's Day, of Halloween and Guild Wars, revolves entirely around this character. It's unlikely we'll see him in the festival until the very end, the finale event, as it happened in Guild Wars 1, but you never know, he might just be permanently available for us to speak to from Monday all the way through till the end of the Halloween event. But yeah, that's Mad King Thorn. That's pretty much everything we know about him at this point. There might be the odd other little bit, like he's got this crazy invisible pony, if you'd believe it, that he rides around on, and there's a lot of very weird, odd facts about him, but generally he's this funny guy, he's this tyrant. Really, we shouldn't like him, but we kind of like to laugh along and laugh at all of his terrible jokes, and that's Mad King Thorn. And hopefully you guys will like, because he's such a cool character, and hopefully that will continue in Guild Wars 2. People will still like really enjoy him and think that he's just this ridiculous, cheesy, stupid, but funny character. But that's Mad King Thorn, guys. We'll see what's going on with Halloween in Guild Wars 2 from Monday. That's me done for the week. I'll see you also on Monday, and I'll probably do some more kind of official Halloween coverage there too. I'll actually have a look at some of the proper updates that have gone out and talk you through the acts as they release, if you guys would be interested in that. But yeah, thanks very much for watching, guys. Hope you're pumped for Halloween. It is already available in Guild Wars 1 if you want to go in and have fun there, and I will see you on Monday. Catch you later.